Elden Ring DLC Shadow of the Erdtree has dropped, and although I am extremely tempted to spoil the bosses of that game, I'm going to kind of hold back and let's look at some other franchises. I'm talking about 5 games in the last 5 years-ish that have had some of the best final bosses. Now, one thing we're going to keep up front is we're not going to include any Souls games, nothing from Elden Ring. We want to keep those spoilers to a bare minimum. However, these games you should have played, you should have gotten to the final boss, and if you haven't, maybe this video will convince you to finally pick up that game and finish it all the way to the end. And with that, here are 5 amazing final bosses from 5 games in the last 5-ish years.
Resident Evil 4 is one of the best remakes of all time, and we'd be hard-pressed not to throw in the final boss battle here in our top 5. You encounter Osmond Sadler on a couple occasions in the story before the climactic showdown with him, but these earlier meetings make this final confrontation all the more sweeter. He's the mastermind of all the evil events in the game, bringing the townspeople under his control and almost getting Leon and Ashley as well. So to stand up on the oil rig with him for a final confrontation is everything you've worked for, and it doesn't disappoint. You get 2 phases with Sadler. The first being the slimy, nasty, arachnid-like form with all the trademark Resident Evil eyeballs and all. He shouts cultish lullabies at you as he chases you down, lamenting Leon for not joining the holy body. It's twisted with this warped sense of religious justice, very unnerving. It's not only the monster's size that makes this fight feel large in scope, but the fact that you get the chance to run around the oil rig either choosing to confront or tactically retreat. You're allowed freedom as opposed to being locked in a confined space. As he continues to berate and harass you, he'll send out his legion of flying bugs to make this whole fight anything but a cakewalk. Then once you're done with that, you're not out of the village yet, as Sadler becomes this behemoth of a monster with a core exposed and tentacles abound. In this phase, you are confined to a small space as Sadler launches his attacks. Your reaction skills better be up to scratch, or else you're not going to be able to avoid this towering beast. This phase feels like a cool extended epilogue to the main boss fight as opposed to a whole separate part, and it gets the job done. And speaking of job done, just like the eyes, it wouldn't be a Resident Evil game without a side character throwing you a super weapon to take the boss out, and that's exactly what we get here. Talk about epic.
I'll give you a holy body.
Still call it a comeback.
Pain in the ass. You know what? Let's take this outside.
The finale to the exceptional, excellent, and all-round greatest games ever created, Hi-Fi Rush, is one hell of a rush, pun intended. You fight, no surprise here, Kale, the CEO, owner, dean of Vanley Robotic Campuses. The fight employs every single skill you have learned in the game, and this is the time to unleash some of the best combos you've picked up. There's a heavy use of the dodge and parry mechanic. Every single set piece you could have imagined in the game that was shown to you is now used. Kale has multiple phases, each one more devastating than the next, and the culmination of the fight on the rooftop of the highest building to the epic tune of Nine Inch Nails' Perfect Drug is something to truly behold. Though I would play the entire song, but I fear we may get copyright struck. The buzzing electrical signs, the lightning, even the movement of Kale and yours is timed to this song. Everything is just amped up, as his second phase requires you to use your buddies and their assistants' powers. The finale, we see Kale power up via the electrical outlets on the roof, and everything gets turned up to 11, harkening back to something similar to Metal Gear Solid 2, a bit of Return of the Jedi in there, and Tron. This is phenomenal. An absolute tour de force final fight. Fighting Kale mano a mano leads to one of the most epic action sequence. What follows next is an insanely cool sequence where all of your buddies join in via this cool Guitar Hero homage. It is just sublime having the music sync up. Each one of your assistants characters, your friends, gets a piece of the action, resulting in a really, really epic end.
You're just a bunch of losers.
Maybe so, but together we're unstoppable.
Are you ready to shed incredulous tears of joy, and not necessarily of sadness? Next up is the final boss of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom, and it's the one and only Ganondorf. This entire fight is a perfect textbook example of an ingeniously layered finale to a game. Of course, Ganon is the primary antagonist of the series, but across this entry he's given the most build up in the story that he's ever had before. And bear in mind that Tears is also the sequel to Breath of the Wild, so this finale is a culmination of two massive games. And it just works. Ganon is designed wickedly. He's a built threat who is truly the only one who can match Link. You thought the slow-mo flurry rush was your special move? Well, the Dorf can do it too. The second phase sees him augment himself with gloom powers, and he is truly evil personified, throwing out crazy attacks left and right, but still as agile as a malevolent deer. Not even the other champions can hold a candle to the Dorf's menace. The final phase sees Ganon completely lose control, and in a brilliant mirroring of Zelda's sacrifice earlier in the game, the Dwarf gives up all his consciousness in one last-ditch attempt to take Link down. While this part may not be that difficult, it's so well executed that it really doesn't even matter. And who doesn't want to fight an awesome dragon? I know I do.
Now we move on to quite possibly one of the best fights, I honestly think, in the last 5 years. Yes, Final Fantasy VII Remake came out in 2019, and we're qualifying this amazing final boss fight as our number 2 spot. Personally, if you ask me, this game is absolutely flawless. Square Enix managed to completely overhaul the real-time fighting system. It's still an RPG, you still select commands, but something about this wicked slow-mo every time you pick your spells or special attacks, it just adds such a true cinematic flair. This fight, though not as crazy as the one in Advent Children, came pretty damn close to making you feel like the superhero Cloud truly is. An absolute cinematic experience with highs and lows, narrative plot twists thrown in for the mix, like this one of my favorite moments. We immediately get all of the cast and crew that sort of gets separated with this epic floating concrete battle kind of reunite and come to Cloud's aid at the last minute. Tifa and Aerith are your control party members, and I don't want anything more than to have Tifa and Aerith by my side as I take on the big bad Sephiroth. Now, originally this wasn't supposed to happen, of course, at this part of the game, but this added final boss fight really is the icing on the cake, if you will. A perfect game that has quite possibly one of the most perfect boss fights. Sephiroth is and always will be one of the greats. And this is it. This is the number one boss fight, final boss fight in the last 5-ish years. Ravenbeak from Metroid Dread. This fight is absolutely epic. Every single skill you have in the game needs to be utilized in an exact and precise manner. Ravenbeak is no cakewalk. I would go on to say probably the hardest boss fight in the last 5-ish, if not 10-ish years. It is really, really cinematic. Every single time you have these cutscene moments, you're asked to fire missiles. You're not just sitting there holding your controller. The fight has 3 wicked phases, second of which has Ravenbeak sort of spawning his massive Chozo wings. And interesting to note that this is the first time we get to see the Chozo actively play a huge part in the game. They're not just a dead civilization. And I mean, you get to meet your adopted Chozo dad and fight him to a massively entertaining and epic finale. On the third phase, it's more or less the same as the first, with a lot of fast movements and counters, and every single time he launches that arm cannon, it's just so epic. Metroid has never been this cinematic, and I actually do love this storyline in Dread, especially this final sequence that has Ravenbeak subduing Samus. After that amazingly epic sequence, Samus is sort of augmented into a Metroid as the Metroid DNA within her awakens. Ravenbeak, injured, gets infected by the X-Parasite and transforms into this Kraid-esque monster. When I talk about firepower, this game gives you the biggest power laser ever. And that's our list, everybody. Let us know what you think. Please like and comment. Let us know, did we miss out on any other epic final boss fights in the last 5-ish years? Maybe 10-ish years? Please let us know. Thank you for sticking with us and watching this video through. And we'll see you in the next one. Take care, everybody.